Not all bread is created equal. And if you like yours soft, fluffy, moist, and delicious, then Hero Bread and Buns should be your first choice. But Hero Bread isn't just about taste and texture. It's high in fiber with ultra-low net carbs with 0 grams of sugar. Order today at hero.co and use the code AH10 to get 10% off your first purchase. That's AH10 at hero.co, HERO.co for 10% off your first purchase.
This is
Make It Plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Someone we really don't talk to enough. I was saying to someone the other day, I hope you all enjoy what we do. I think we make a great team. We tried to convince some others of that. And, but the person I was talking to yesterday saying we make a great team said, yeah, I agree. I said, well, you should call some other people so they can understand that. But his newsletter is doing great, and thankful his is, because there's some others that are a little more troubling. Like I think Glenn is doing one and some other people. But we're glad we have Glenn Greenwald. We're glad we have Eric Boehlert to balance some of that, and so people can really hear about what's going on out here. Pressrun.media. All right, please subscribe. Very important that you do so. Our dear friend Eric Boehlert is with us. How are you, buddy?
Good to be here.
All right, glad to have you. So a lot to cover, and your latest on Limbaugh, I want to get to that, but I was just chatting off mic with Eric about his piece on Maggie Haberman, and he was saying that, how popular that piece is. She's kind of become, I guess, the poster person for false equivalency and covering Trump and all of that, hasn't she?
Yeah, the piece I did was really looking at her access, and my point was, she was toasted as literally, for her Trump work. She obviously did some good Trump work. Times was blessed with really good access. I think a lot of it came from Ivanka and Jared, and from Donald himself, who I no doubt talked directly to Maggie Haberman on the record and also off the record.
Right.
So it was kind of a weird relationship the Times had with Trump. I think they both used each other to their benefit. Haberman has talked in the past how Trump was obsessed with the New York Times, going back to his times in New York City, was desperate for the paper's approval and talked to her more than he would have talked to any other newspaper. He also attacked her and attacked the New York Times and the liberal media, and they're out to get me and they're enemies of the state. So he had a weird relationship. The Times had a weird relationship because, he drove their subscription rates through the roof. They marketed themselves. There was a whole documentary series, I think, on Showtime. They marketed themselves as leading the resistance and standing up to Trump. Right. But as you and I both know, that's a hollow boast. They tiptoed up to this line and refused to call him a liar, refused to call him a racist, refused to call him a sociopath. But anyway, so Maggie Haberman was blessed with a lot of access to Trump and to the White House. New York Times, Elle Magazine, Politico, they all said she was the greatest reporter of her generation. And the Times itself described her as having an unprecedented run in American journalism, her coverage of Trump. And so my question was, well, if she's so plugged in as she has all these great sources, then why isn't she producing all these exclusive under Biden? Why we're the conveyor belts of exclusives and scoops, and I asked, did every one of her sources leave town with Trump, and just how important was access to her success and the Times success? And I think it was basically 100%. After he left, the Times announced that Haberman was going to continue to cover politics and continue to cover Trump. The problem is she's covering someone who nobody really cares about anymore. I mean, he's basically in seclusion down in Florida, and he's releasing these gibberish statements that carry no weight. So that part of her beat doesn't really exist anymore. And I don't think she's published 2 significant stories about the Biden administration, because the Biden administration has cut off the leaks. There is no drama in the White House anymore. There is no circus atmosphere. There are no fights spilling out into public between the factions and the aides. It's a very traditional Obama-type White House. And so suddenly all that access is gone, and suddenly Maggie Haberman is on the outside looking in. And again, to me, it just kind of confirms that, you know, her success, and a lot of the times the success, was all about this access that they were given by the Trump White House, and what the Times did in exchange for that access, what we've talked about many times.
Right. Yeah, we have talked about that many times. But now that I hear you put it in the way you're putting it, Eric, you know, I think now it begs the question as to how valuable access really is and how much you should rely upon it. Because if the goal is to produce even news stories from a business point of view, and you can't do that, and you have feasted upon only that which gives you access, like you say, what are you left with? You know, and you've cultivated an audience. And when I say you, I mean, of course, the New York Times, you've cultivated an audience that has thrived upon what you've put out there. And now you don't have anything to put out there. So to me, I mean, if when you and I went to journalism school, I don't remember there being a course on access. I guess that's what I'm saying. I missed that. You missed that class too, didn't you? I didn't. Right. My son, my 18-year-old son, who's a freshman, ladies and gentlemen, received at his university on Jackie Robinson Day 2 awards in the mass communications academic department: an award for outstanding freshman and an award for overall excellence in radio. Okay. And I'll be honest with you, Eric, I didn't teach him radio. He must have been watching me. I taught him baseball. He's there playing baseball. I taught him baseball.
Oh, good for him.
So I didn't really teach him radio. But there was not a class in there for outstanding performance in access.
Right.
So, you know, the point I'm making is, you know, you kind of, you live by that rule, and I guess you can die by it as well. There's nothing else for her to write about or talk about. I mean, Biden's doing some stuff,
right?
But I guess if we don't have access and we can't scandalize it some kind of way, which to me is even impressive, because
right.
People are digging. The fact that people have been digging and can't find anything on Biden, I don't know how many of us could say the same.
That's true, right?
I mean, maybe even 2 of us, they start digging, and we don't want to invite you all to do it. But I'm saying, to me, that's incredible. So when you live by access,
yes.
and you live by scandal and drama, you die by it.
You really do. And so what the Times was doing with that access was normalizing, right? That's how they normalized Trump. I pointed out, I asked, you know, Haberman was given a sit down with Trump in 2019, and I asked, you know, if the New York Times had been publishing Trump Lies headline for 3 years, do you think she would have gotten special access to Trump? If she had been interviewing mental health experts for years about what it's like to have a pathological liar in the White, what are the ramifications for our country? You know, do you think she would have been receiving special access? And of course, the answer is no. So the Times led this kind of unfortunate push to normalize Trump, particularly during the first 3 years. And I think a lot of that was driven by access. And again, you know, if she's going to be touted as this, you know, the greatest reporter since Woodward and Bernstein, then why hasn't she produced anything under the Biden years? It's because the circus left town, and she had access to the circus, and she's not alone. I mean, the Beltway press, I think, is getting a little cranky about the complete lack of leaks, the complete lack of drama, the complete lack of infighting, and they're kind of scratching around. They don't want to go back to the Obama years where, you know, basically their job is to cover policy and cover legislation, and because that's not fun. No. And you don't get book deals out of that.
More MIP after this message. So what do you predict they're going to do? What do you predict that Maggie Haberman will do? And the New York Times since the circus of that town. What can they do with that?
I don't think they really have much choice. The Biden White House, the Biden administration is very disciplined. Look, they're staffed by professionals. Trump brought in a bunch of yahoos and a bunch of jokers and a bunch of nut jobs. I mean, just look at, his COVID advisor, Dr. Atlas, at the end. I mean, he was bringing in total nut jobs. And so that produced all this drama and all this scandal. And Trump was doing these ridiculous COVID pandemic briefings where he lied nonstop. All that's gone. All of it's gone. All of it's been unplugged. The press knew that was going to happen. They've been kind of bracing for it. I think the reality is even more disturbing for them than they thought. There's no way that was going to become the new normal. And if you watch, if you watch the daily press briefings at the White House, the reporters are really kind of, stretching and scrambling on some days to really come up with any kind of conflict. Why is Joe Biden flying to Delaware? As if that would be a problem during the pandemic on Air Force One, things like that.
And it looks like it's become sport to Jen Psaki. Like she's ready for it every day. Like that's probably what some of the prep is. We know they're going to do something crazy. It's almost like a video game. And she's swatting down all of the foolishness. And she's so
good.
Yeah, and they can't even scandalize her. Remember when they could scandalize Sarah Huckabee,
right,
some of those other characters, because they became caricatures unto themselves. Right. You can't do anything with Jen. You just can't. Biden is just a regular dude. She's just a regular. I mean, you can't do anything.
Yeah, and the beauty for her is, unlike Huckabee and the others, her boss isn't a pathological liar.
Right.
So she's not constantly up there scrambling, trying to figure out what he just said on Twitter, covering up these obvious lies. And Psaki is just absolute godsend for Biden. I think she's the perfect voice for his era. I wrote about her last week, and I kind of mentioned her third grader teacher head tilt that she kind of gives when she gets a particularly dopey question. She doesn't pick a fight, but she has this sense of, she will patiently listen to the dumb question. But then also there's a sense of really, you want to talk about this. And then, she patiently walks them through the answer. Everyone leaves happy, but everyone understands that she's really not going to put up with any nonsense today.
I used to imagine whether or not I could do that job.
Oh, gosh.
And now I know I can, because it would be really.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody watch it, though, because we'd be getting down. I'd go in there like, yo, what's up? What's
I know, right?
What you going to do today? Let's get up. And then I'd even throw back right at them. They'd fire me on the first day because I'd be like, well, let's talk about your baggage.
Yeah.
I mean, I would get real personal. But you've got two new reasons why Fox should not be in the White House press corps, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, speaking of Psaki, I mean, she patiently deals with the Fox News questions, and I think it brandishes the Biden White House image of reaching out to the other side, not being afraid of Fox News, dealing with them in a kind of a dry, professional way. So I think that helps them. But I argued right after the election that, Fox News should not be in that briefing room. And two recent examples to me just confirm that, which was this Matt Gaetz story. They had ignored it for days on end. So, I went back and I did a check, over a week. MSNBC and CNN mentioned him, the sex trafficking scandal 400 plus times. Fox News mentioned it 40 times. I mean, it's not a coincidence. That is clearly a top-down edict that was, do not touch this story. It's embarrassing to the Republican Party. It's embarrassing to us because we turned that guy into a star. He was on Hannity, I think, 115 times in 1 year. So not only won't Fox News defend him, they just gaslight it. Or as I say, gas torch it. I mean, it just does not exist. That's not, obviously, no news organization in America would ignore the biggest political scandal of the year just because it's got an R next to it. And then, the Tucker Carlson doing his white supremacy replacement theory, saying Democrats, their political strategy is to apparently bring in tens of millions of migrants and have them somehow overnight become eligible to vote, and they will replace white America by voting out Republicans. This is straight out of, it's modern day KKK rhetoric. And he, of course, is tripled down on it because any controversy that comes along, he embraces it. Fox, just a quick note, Fox News really no longer has to worry about advertising boycotts. Tucker used to run into that problem, but Fox News gets most of its fees from the cable companies,
right.
From you and me. Fox News has one of the highest carry rates of Verizon, CNN, Comcast. They all pay Fox News for the right to carry the network. So Tucker Carlson could run without advertising. Fox News would still be making money. Yeah. And he and both of them have realized that in the last couple of years. So he no longer goes on these surprise vacations when he steps in it. That's what he used to do. When advertisers would leave, he'd say something hateful and racist and awful. Advertisers would leave. He'd go on an unannounced vacation for a week. That doesn't happen anymore. He just goes on the next night and doubles and triples down. So that's what he's doing with this white supremacy rhetoric. So again, how could you possibly look at that and say Fox News deserves to be legitimized with White House press credentials? I understand the Biden White House doesn't want to have that fight, and they've got a full plate, but it just delays the conversation we need to have about Fox News, which just gets more and more debasing and disgusting and hateful and racist.
Yeah. They're and I mean, talk about clinical projection.
Yeah.
With what they've done in QAnon and the fascination with so-called pedophilia on the Democratic side and pizza parlors and kidnapping children. You've got the Matt Gaetz story, and then you've got, I did a story this week earlier, Ollie Breland, Mother Jones had written a story, Eric, about how the HBO documentary on QAnon pretty much left out the current QAnon host's role in child pornography and profiting from it at some point. I mean, that's the industry he's been in. So it's projection, and they don't have anything to project, as we said on Joe Biden.
Right.
So they're running out of, well, they are projecting court packing now.
Yeah, right.
Biden is trying to court pack.
He's trying to ruin the courts.
They haven't been court packing. He's court packing.
Hey, good. A quick note on that, and I wrote about this when it came up November last year. This court packing. I'm happy to see, Biden is talking about it. There's a commission. Democrats are pushing legislation, and I'm seeing headlines about expanding the court. So court packing was a really bad Republican talking point rhetoric. 4 months ago, 5 months ago, all the mainstream press was using that court packing. And now I think they've seen the errors of their way. They're talking about expanding the court in headlines and things like that, which is good news.
More MIP after this message. Yeah, no, that is good news and glad. And I was actually surprised from a political perspective that he actually did it and appointed the commission. I was like, whoa, last week in a couple of days and within 48 hours, he pledged $5.3 billion in gun violence prevention to organizations on the ground.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, then on a Friday, he's talking about expanding the Supreme Court. I was like, wait a minute. I don't even know what to do with this. So no, that's a great thing. Now, so I'm glad they're doing expanding rather than packing the media. Yeah. That's a good observation. But they kind of botched the Johnson & Johnson story, didn't they?
They did, yeah. So this is the biggest COVID news in probably a month. It's really the first bout of bad vaccine news since Biden took over. He took what was a national embarrassment and turned it into a model for the world in terms of the vaccine rollout. We're hitting 4 or 5 million shots a day. Just extraordinary. And so I think the reason I point out it was bad news, I think the press kind of liked that. I think the press was like, whoa, here's some bad news, the pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I did a piece, I linked to 10 headlines, every major news organization in America. Not one of them in the headline mentioned the pause was because of 6 cases. And headlines are what matters. We've seen study after study, particularly on social media, that stories that get fly around, 60, 70% of the people don't click on it and read it. Yes, if you clicked on it and read it, you would see 7 million J&J shots, 6 cases. If you didn't click on it, as most people don't, I think most readers would think, or viewers would think there are hundreds, probably thousands of cases.
Right.
Because, just logically, well, if you don't know a lot about epidemiology and this sort of thing, you wouldn't think they would stop 6, 7 million shots for 6 blood clot cases and deadly, obviously. So logically you think, well, there's probably 100 or thousands, or this is really bad. So it would have been such a simple fix, CDC urges halt on J&J vaccine after 6 blood clot cases. But they left all that out. And I think that's really dangerous, A, during a public health crisis, and B, when the country is fighting this hesitancy. And you're just going to add to the people who might be leaning against getting it. You're creating, this week-long story that you don't really have to create. But again, I don't know what the motivation was. I think some of it was, we finally got some bad news. This is much more interesting than constantly reporting on how great the vaccine rollout is. This is conflict. This is news. This is, right. Trump's going to put out an incoherent statement. But again, I think it would have been such a simple fix to put the number 6 cases in the headlines, put the context right in there, instead of creating kind of a panic that wasn't necessary, I think.
Well, and it was alarming in the sense, in my experience, in my own formal poll, many of the people who have apprehensiveness or apprehension about the vaccine are women.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's for any particular reason, but I accept that. Most of the women I know personally in my peer group and younger have serious apprehension about the vaccine.
Interesting, yeah.
And so when that just goes out like that, that's really irresponsible. But you're right on the conflict, because I'm learning more and more, especially on social media. Conflict is what sells. The algorithms push up conflict and controversy.
Sure.
That gets the more likes, retweets, and whatnot. And obviously the mainstream media has picked up on that. So you got to have something negative. That's what's interesting. It is not exciting for everything just to be steady as she goes. It has to.
And specifically when you're talking about the vaccine, again, there hadn't really been any bad news under the Biden administration in terms of the rollout. And again, for people who are hesitant or have concerns, you see that headline, the one without the context, and of course it's going to be an aha moment. I knew it. I knew it. That confirms my suspicion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's dangerous. That's unfortunate.
Lastly, Rush Limbaugh, speaking of conflict, made a living off of it, made a fortune off of it, built a radio empire, an evil empire, an industry off of it. In your latest, you argue that we may never see that again. Yeah,
the headline is why there'll never be another Rush Limbaugh, thank God. So there's been lots of chatter about, who's going to replace Limbaugh. And, he had the noon to 3 slot to himself for about 3 decades. Obviously AM radio, conservative, or talk radio is 95% conservative. So there's lots of players, but most of them stayed out of the way from noon to 3 because, as you say, it was, such an empire. I mean, his ratings were sagging towards the end, and he wasn't on as many stations. So the question is, well, who's going to replace him? And my argument is there's never going to be a replacement, and that's a good thing. Premier Networks, which syndicates his show, is actually just running reruns. They're not even going to hire anyone, which I think tells you how thin they think the field is. But if you're running a talk radio station in St. Louis or Sacramento, having reruns of Rush Limbaugh in the middle of your afternoon is probably not the most interesting programming. But the people who are kind of stepping up, I think, are clearly never going to maintain that mantle. Talk radio on the AM side, particularly conservative talk radio, has lots of problems. It skews so old. They're losing out to podcasts. They're losing out to social media and things like that. So the good news is the Wicked Witch is dead, and we're never going to see that again. And I point out one of the problems was the mainstream media, just glorified Limbaugh for so many years. They treated him as this very serious and influential person. The good news is I don't think a Ben Shapiro or another kind of right-wing ideologue today is ever going to get that kind of glowing mainstream media coverage. So that's also a good thing.
Well, and not only that, practically speaking, Rush was the first to really do what he did the way he did it.
Yep.
I don't know because you're right, podcasting is taking over. I don't think people are interested in hearing someone talk to themselves solely for 3 hours anymore.
He was there first. He had a knack for it, and also we can never forget. I mean, he arrived, almost the exact same time Reagan's Federal Communication Commission got rid of the fairness doctrine.
Right.
Before that, you had to have quote unquote balanced programming. That gave a green light for Limbaugh to bash Democrats every day for 3 hours, which he did for 3 decades. But yeah, you're right. The media landscape has just changed. So again, I keep seeing these articles about who's going to take over and who's launching these new shows. No one's going to take over. And as someone who was at Media Matters for 10 years and monitored Limbaugh for so long, I think I just say thank God.
Yeah, no, really.
That long national nightmare is over.
Yeah, no, thank goodness, and glad it is over. And speaking of pedophilia allegations, we don't know if any of that's substantiated with Rush. But you're right. And for a time he was declining. Fox News kind of took his spot as a news. Right. People watch television. So yeah, you're right. And thank goodness it's gone. Folks, we want you to read Pressrun.media. Please subscribe. Keep up with everything. You will be a lot smarter because of it. I promise you. Satisfaction guarantee. Eric Boehlert, always good to have our brother on. Thank you, man.
All right. Have a great weekend.
All right. You do the same. Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.
Be a barbecue hero with delicious, ultra-low net carb hero bread, buns, and tortillas. Soft and fluffy, high in fiber, and with 0 grams of sugar, up to 10 grams of protein, coming in at under 100 calories per serving. Oh, and did I mention they taste like their mouth-watering traditional versions? I mean, what's not to love? Use code AH10 for 10% off your first hero bread purchase at hero.co. That's AH10 for 10% off at hero.co.